Your attitude doesn't fit our culture, Colin Draper said, his voice flat and emotionless through my laptop speakers. We're going to have to let you go, effective immediately. I stared at the screen in disbelief, my mind racing to process what was happening. Just yesterday, I had presented a comprehensive plan to improve our project management system, a plan that would have increased efficiency and transparency across the company. Colin, I don't understand. My proposal was about improving workflow and... The decision is final, Tanya. His eyes darted away from the camera. Human Resources will send you the necessary paperwork. Please return any company property by the end of the week. Before I could respond, he clicked, End meeting, and my screen went black. I sat there, stunned, in my home office in Fort Lauderdale. 7 years of dedication to Vertex Solutions, countless late nights ensuring projects were delivered on time, and this was how it ended. A 3-minute Zoom call, and a digital door slammed in my face. My name is Tanya Whitmore. At 40 years old, I had built my reputation as an operations analyst who gets things done. I had saved failing projects, smoothed over client relationships damaged by upper management's missteps, and consistently increased our efficiency metrics year after year. The clients loved me because I was straightforward and delivered results. What Colin didn't mention, what he carefully avoided saying, was that my proposed system would have revealed exactly how he and other executives were misallocating resources. The new tracking tools would have shown, with uncomfortable clarity, how budgets were being inflated and timelines manipulated to cover for poor planning at the top. I glanced at my notebook where I'd jotted down the key points of my presentation. Next to it was my phone, which had already begun to vibrate with messages from concerned colleagues who had heard the news. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I opened my laptop and created a new document. At the top, I typed, Whitmore Consulting Group, Business Plan. A strange calm settled over me. I had expected to feel rage or despair, but instead I felt something different, clarity. I had spent years building relationships with our clients, understanding their needs, and delivering solutions that actually worked. Those connections and that knowledge didn't belong to Vertex Solutions. They were mine. As the reality of my situation sank in, I realized this wasn't an ending. It was an opportunity to finally build something that reflected my values: transparency, efficiency, and genuine client service. The phone continued to buzz, but I ignored it for now. I had planning to do. I had always been the problem solver, the fixer. When I joined Vertex Solutions 7 years ago, they were a struggling project management firm, barely staying afloat in a competitive market. Their processes were outdated, their client communication was inconsistent, and their reputation was suffering. Within my first year, I had completely restructured their workflow systems, implemented regular client check-ins, and developed custom solutions for their 3 biggest accounts. Colin, who had just been promoted to Chief Operations Officer back then, took credit for most of my innovations during executive meetings. But I didn't mind. I believed in the work, not the recognition. "You're invaluable, Tanya," he would say, after I salvaged yet another project that had been mismanaged from the start. "The clients trust you." It was true. While Colin and the other executives wined and dined potential clients with grand promises, I was the one building relationships based on actually delivering on those promises. I spent hours understanding each client's unique challenges, often creating customized solutions that went beyond our standard offerings. James Henderson from Trivexa Corp once told me, "I don't care who's officially in charge. We know you're the one making things happen." Similar sentiments were echoed by Diane Powell at North Peak Engineering and Robert Johnson at Borealis Capital. They all knew who to call when they needed straight answers and real solutions. My husband Tyler had been telling me for years that I was undervalued at Vertex. "You're carrying that company on your shoulders," he would say as I worked late nights fixing problems I hadn't created. "One day, you should strike out on your own." I always dismissed the idea. I had job security, a decent salary, and I was making a difference, even if it wasn't always recognized. Besides, starting over seemed daunting and risky. What Tyler couldn't see, what I was only beginning to realize myself, was how the company culture had been slowly deteriorating. The focus had shifted from client satisfaction to executive bonuses. Projects were being understaffed while budgets mysteriously increased. Resources were allocated based on which managers were in favor that week, not which projects actually needed them. My proposed system would have brought all of this into the light. It would have created automatic reports showing resource allocation, budget usage, and time tracking across all projects. The dashboard would have made it impossible to hide the inefficiencies I had been quietly compensating for over the years. In retrospect, I should have seen Colin's reaction coming. My proposal wasn't just an improvement. It was a threat to the status quo that benefited him and his inner circle. The morning after my termination, I woke up with a strange sense of lightness. Tyler brought me coffee in bed, his face a mixture of concern and anger on my behalf. "I still can't believe they fired you through a video call," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "After everything you've done for them." I took a sip of coffee and reached for my laptop. The funny thing is, I'm not even upset anymore. I'm relieved. Relieved? I've been compensating for their mismanagement for years, covering up their mistakes, working around their egos. I'm exhausted, Tyler. He studied my face. "So what are you going to do?" I turned my laptop toward him, showing the business plan I had stayed up half the night creating. "I'm going to start my own consulting firm. Do what I've always done, but on my terms." Tyler scanned the document, his expression shifting from surprise to excitement. "You're serious about this?" "Completely serious," I confirmed. "I've already secured the domain name and started outlining service packages." I spent the rest of the morning sending emails and making phone calls. Not to badmouth Vertex or Colin. I was too professional for that. But to let my contacts know about my career transition. I was careful with my wording, simply stating that I was embarking on a new venture, focused on operational efficiency and project management consulting. By lunchtime, my inbox was filling with responses. Former colleagues expressing shock at my departure, industry contacts offering connections, and most surprisingly, an email from James Henderson at Trivexa Corp. "Heard about your departure from Vertex. Let's talk ASAP." I called him immediately. "Tanya," he said when he picked up. "What the hell happened?" I gave him the sanitized version. A difference in vision for the company's future. James wasn't buying it. "Colin finally realized you were the one keeping everything together, didn't he? Got threatened?" "I couldn't say," I replied diplomatically. "Well, his loss," James continued. "Listen, we have 3 major projects scheduled with Vertex for the next quarter, but frankly, you were the only reason we stayed with them. If you're going independent, we'd rather work directly with you." I felt a flutter of excitement mixed with trepidation. "That's a significant offer, James. It's a no-brainer for us. Your strategic approach has saved us countless hours and resources. Send me a proposal by the end of the week." After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Then my phone rang again. It was Diane Powell from North Peak Engineering with essentially the same message. By the end of the day, Robert Johnson from Borealis Capital had also called. 3 of Vertex's biggest clients, representing nearly 40% of their quarterly revenue, were ready to follow me out the door. That night, as I updated my business plan with this unexpected development, I realized that what Colin had intended as punishment had instead become my liberation. 1 week after my termination, Whitmore Consulting Group was officially established. I had converted our guest bedroom into a proper office, complete with a professional setup for video calls. Tyler had surprised me with a custom nameplate for my desk. Tanya Whitmore, founder and CEO. I was in the middle of finalizing my proposal for Trivexa Corp when my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Jessica Barnes, Vertex's HR director. "Tanya," she said when I answered. her voice unusually tentative. "How are you?" "I'm doing well, Jessica. What can I do for you?" "Well, Colin asked me to reach out. There seems to be some confusion with a few of our clients. They're requesting to terminate their contracts." I leaned back in my chair. "And you're calling me because they've specifically mentioned your name. Colin thought perhaps you might have influenced their decision." I chose my words carefully. "I've started my own consulting firm, which I'm legally entitled to do. I haven't violated any non-compete clauses as Vertex doesn't have them. If clients are making business decisions, that's their prerogative." There was a pause on the line. "Would you consider coming back? Colin is prepared to offer you a significant raise and a new title." The offer caught me by surprise, but it only took a moment to find my answer. "I appreciate the offer, Jessica, but I've already committed to a new path." After hanging up, I received an email from Trivexa Corp. Confirming they had officially terminated their contract with Vertex Solutions and were looking forward to working with Whitmore Consulting Group. Attached was a signed copy of the proposal I had sent them, approved without a single revision. Within hours, similar emails arrived from North Peak Engineering and Borealis Capital. Just like that, I had 3 major clients and a packed schedule for the next quarter. The following day, I received a message from David Chen, one of Vertex's senior project managers, and someone I had worked closely with for years. "Need to talk. Can I call you?" I agreed, and when David called, he sounded like he was speaking in hushed tones. "Things are chaotic here," he said. "After those 3 clients pulled out, Colin called an emergency meeting. He's blaming everyone but himself." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely concerned for my former colleagues. "Don't be sorry. You should see the looks on the executives' faces. They finally realized who was actually keeping the clients happy." David paused. "Listen, several of us are thinking about jumping ship. Would you be interested in bringing on some experienced team members?" I hadn't planned on expanding so quickly, but having a trusted team would allow me to take on more clients sooner. "Send me their resumes," I told him. By the end of the second week, Whitmore Consulting Group had grown to include David and 2 other former Vertex employees, Ana Martinez, an exceptional data analyst, and Patrick Wilson, a skilled client relations manager. We set up shop in a small but professional office space I leased in downtown Fort Lauderdale. It was a stretch financially, but I knew the importance of presenting a credible business image to prospective clients. What I didn't realize was how quickly word would spread in our industry. My phone was ringing constantly with inquiries from potential clients who had heard about the new firm started by that miracle worker from Vertex. Meanwhile, I heard through industry contacts that Colin was scrambling to prevent further client defections. He had finally begun implementing some of the very changes I had proposed. Too little, too late. 3 months into running Whitmore Consulting Group, we had already outgrown our small office space. With a client list that was expanding weekly, and a team that now included 7 former Vertex employees, I was looking at larger offices and considering our long-term growth strategy. One evening, as I was wrapping up for the day, David stepped into my office with an unusual expression on his face. "You're going to want to see this," he said, placing his tablet on my desk. It was an industry newsletter with the headline, "Vertex Solutions Announces Restructuring Amid Client Exodus." The article detailed how the company had lost over 50% of its client base in just 12 weeks and was now laying off nearly a third of its staff. "Colin's been demoted," David added. "The board finally stepped in." I skimmed the article, feeling a complex mix of emotions. I hadn't set out to damage Vertex. I had simply created something better. "There's more," David said, taking back the tablet and navigating to another page. "Look who's reaching out." It was a LinkedIn message from Edward Novak, Vertex's CEO. "Tanya, I think we need to talk. The board has some questions about the systems you developed while at Vertex, and frankly, we could use your insights. Would you be open to a consultation?" I looked up at David, who was grinning now. "They want to hire you to fix the mess they created when they fired you." The irony wasn't lost on me. Let me think about it, I told David. That night, I discussed the situation with Tyler over dinner. You don't owe them anything, he reminded me. But it could be good business to help them. Plus, it would show everyone that you're the bigger person. I nodded, considering the angles. It would also give me a chance to implement the transparency measures I always wanted to see there. The next day, I responded to Edward's message, agreeing to meet, but making it clear that I would be coming as a consultant, not as a potential employee. The meeting was set for the following week at Vertex's headquarters. When I arrived, the atmosphere was noticeably different. The reception area was quieter, with fewer employees hurrying about. Edward greeted me himself, looking worn and humbled. "Thank you for coming, Tanya," he said, leading me to the conference room. "I appreciate your willingness to talk." In the conference room, I was surprised to find not only Edward, but also 3 board members. Colin was conspicuously absent. "Before we begin," Edward said once we were all seated, "I want to apologize for how your departure was handled. It was unprofessional, and as we've now realized, extremely short-sighted." One of the board members, an older woman I recognized as Victoria Winters, spoke up. "We've reviewed your proposal for system improvements from before your termination. It's exactly what this company needs, and frankly, should have implemented years ago. We'd like to hire Whitmore Consulting Group to implement those systems," Edward explained. "We're prepared to offer a very competitive contract." I listened carefully, asking detailed questions about their expectations and timeline. It was a substantial project that would require significant resources from my growing company. As our meeting concluded, Victoria walked me to the elevator. "Off the record," she said quietly, "Colin's decision to let you go might have been the most expensive mistake in this company's history. Some of us on the board are still trying to understand how it happened." I smiled politely. Sometimes it takes a disruption to see what's really valuable. As the elevator doors closed, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me, not because Vertex was struggling, but because my worth had finally been recognized, not just by them, but by the entire industry. The contract with Vertex turned out to be just the beginning. As news spread that Whitmore Consulting Group was now working with the very company that had fired its founder, our credibility in the industry soared. Businesses were intrigued by a consultancy that could deliver such value that even a former employer would swallow their pride to work with them. 6 months after launching my company, we had moved into a spacious office in a prestigious building in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Our team had grown to 15 employees, most of them specialists I had handpicked for their exceptional skills and client-focused mindset. On the day we signed our 10th major client, I organized a small celebration in the office. As we were raising glasses of champagne to toast our success, my assistant informed me that someone was asking to see me in reception. To my surprise, it was Colin Draper. "Do you have a minute?" he asked, looking uncomfortable in our sleek reception area. I led him to my office, curious about his unexpected visit. "Congratulations on your success," he began awkwardly, gesturing at the office around us. "You've built something impressive here." "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "What can I do for you, Colin?" He shifted in his seat. "I'm not here on behalf of Vertex. I was let go last month." I didn't respond, waiting for him to continue. "The transparency systems you implemented revealed some discrepancies in my management decisions." He cleared his throat. The board wasn't pleased. I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. The very system he had fired me for proposing had ultimately exposed his mismanagement. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, though we both knew I wasn't. "Look, Tanya," he said, leaning forward. "I know I made a mistake with you. I was protecting myself instead of doing what was right for the company. But I'm good at what I do when I have the right guidance." He took a deep breath. "I'm here to ask if you might have a position available." The request was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't respond. Colin Draper, the man who had fired me via Zoom without warning or discussion, was asking me for a job. I studied him carefully. Was this genuine humility or just another self-serving move? "Colin," I said finally, "my company is built on transparency, collaboration, and genuine client service. Those aren't just buzzwords here. They're how we operate every day." He nodded quickly. "That's exactly why I want to work with you. I've learned from my mistakes." I considered his request. Hiring Colin would be seen as either an incredible act of forgiveness or a foolish decision to bring in someone who had already proven his character. "I don't have a position for you," I said at last, watching his face fall. "But I do have some contacts in the industry who might. I'll make some calls on one condition." "What's that?" "That you understand what actually happened between us. I wasn't fired because my attitude didn't fit the culture. I was fired because I threatened a system that was benefiting you at the expense of clients and colleagues." Colin had the decency to look ashamed. "You're right, and I've paid for that mistake." As I walked him out, I realized that my company's success wasn't just measured in clients and revenue. It was also reflected in this moment, having the confidence and security to face a former adversary without bitterness. Later that afternoon, I made those calls as promised. Not because Colin deserved my help, but because it was the kind of leader I had chosen to be. One who values growth and second chances, even for those who hadn't offered me the same. 1 year after being fired over Zoom, I stood at the podium as the keynote speaker at the annual Project Management Excellence Conference in Miami. The irony wasn't lost on me. The previous year, Colin had represented Vertex Solutions at this very event. "Success isn't just about having the right strategies," I told the room filled with industry professionals. "It's about implementing them with integrity and transparency." As I spoke, I could see the executives from Vertex Solutions sitting in the front row. Edward Novak nodded along with my points, while Victoria Winters actually took notes. Their company had stabilized under new leadership, though they hadn't regained their former market position. "When I founded Whitmore Consulting Group," I continued, "it wasn't about competing with former employers or proving anyone wrong. It was about creating a space where good work could be done honestly, where clients received the value they paid for, and where employees were recognized for their contributions." After my speech, during the networking reception, Edward approached me with a glass of sparkling water. "That was an excellent presentation, Tanya," he said, though I couldn't help feeling it was partially directed at us. I smiled. "Take it however you need to, Edward." He glanced around at the crowd, many of whom were gathered around my colleagues from Whitmore Consulting. "Your company has captured the imagination of the industry. Everyone wants to know your secret." "There is no secret," I replied. "Just good work, genuine relationships, and transparent processes. Everything I tried to implement at Vertex." Edward's expression turned reflective. "The board has been discussing a potential acquisition offer. Vertex is still struggling to rebuild its client base, and your systems have only highlighted the structural issues we've ignored for years." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by his candor. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Would Whitmore Consulting Group consider acquiring Vertex Solutions? It would be an unorthodox move, but potentially beneficial for both companies." The acquisition of Vertex Solutions by Whitmore Consulting Group made headlines in all the industry publications. What began as my personal revenge tale had transformed into a business success story that would be taught in management schools. We retained most of Vertex's remaining employees, integrating them into our more transparent culture. Some adapted readily to the change, while others struggled with the accountability our systems demanded. Colin, who had found a position with a smaller firm thanks to my recommendation, sent me a congratulatory email that read simply, "You built something remarkable from adversity. I'm learning from your example." On the day we finalized the acquisition, I invited the original team members who had joined me in those early days to a private dinner. "I never imagined we'd end up here," David said, raising his glass. "From that tiny office to owning the company that let us go." Anna laughed. "I remember when we were scraping together equipment and working ridiculous hours. Now look at us." I looked around the table at the people who had taken a chance on my vision, when it was nothing more than a defiant response to being dismissed. I couldn't have done any of this without all of you believing in what we could build together. Patrick, who had recently been promoted to head our client relations department, spoke up. You know what the best part is? We didn't have to compromise who we are to get here. We won by being better, not by being ruthless. As we celebrated, I reflected on the journey. When Colin had ended that Zoom call, cutting me off without the dignity of a proper conversation, he thought he was demonstrating his power. Instead, he had inadvertently launched me into creating something far more significant than I would have otherwise built. Sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as unfair dismissals. Whitmore Consulting Group continued to grow, eventually opening offices in 3 additional cities. My leadership style, focused on empowering employees and maintaining genuine client relationships, became a case study in effective management. I often reflected on how being fired in that 3-minute Zoom call had become the best career development of my life, turning adversity into triumph through professionalism rather than petty revenge.